Hey team, Richard Tubb here with another episode of TubbTalk, the podcast for managed service providers. Now, a few months ago, I had the great opportunity to see today's guest on the show speak at the IT Nation event in London. Now, his session was packed full of so many great insights for MSPs that I just had to invite him to come on the show. So that's exactly what I did. Kevin O'Loughlin founded Irish MSP Nostra in 2006 with the aim of making a positive impact and demonstrating Ireland's potential for global success. From a starting pioneering cloud email adoption service in 2007, Nostra has grown to deliver 50 million euros in annual revenue and is growing at 30% year on year through strategic acquisitions and organic growth. And it's on its journey to become a market-leading full-service IT managed service provider business. I'm super excited to interview this man. Kevin, welcome to TubbTalk.
Richard, lovely to meet you. As you describe that, I have to think, is that actually us? But yeah, that's done.
And that's not your bio, that's what I've picked up there. So that's what other people are saying about you, Kevin. But let's jump straight into that. I said I saw you at IT Nation talking on stage about cybersecurity, about so many aspects of running an MSP. But to give our listeners, the full backstory, let's rewind back to 2006. What was the impetus behind founding Nostra?
So actually quite straightforward, and for the technical people on the call, they'll probably get this right. So at the time, virtualization was just coming out, and it was a huge change. A bit like it's as big as the AI change of today. It's as big as the cloud change of 2008 and 9. Like in 2004 or 5, virtualization was coming out, but most MSPs or IT companies at the time resisted it, right? And they were going in selling 10 servers to companies that in theory could have bought one with a virtualized environment, but they didn't understand it fully. I got it from the very first time I heard about it, and that's just brilliant, right? And it was a real frustration for me that we couldn't become a partner with. So ultimately, I decided I was going to do it myself, set up Nostra, and its objective was I never wanted to be the IT company that, the blockbuster video. I always wanted to adopt the new technology as and when it came out, the early adopters, and go with change and not have legacy technology holding us back. And that was really it. It was about going, what is the next thing? And actually, in our first 2 years of business, so we started as a VMware partner back in December 06, and had a hugely successful start. Obviously, the European or global recession kicked in 2008 and slowed us right down. And at that point, we actually were the first European company to launch HMC 4.5, which was Microsoft Cloud, right? So it became us and became Office 365. But back then, Microsoft wanted partners like Nostra to build your own infrastructure, put on their cloud technology and have multi-tenancy email run. And I suppose, at our core, it's about seeing the future, which is where the name Nostra came from. It's part of Nostradamus, looking into the future. So we wanted to be always looking to the future. How can we make sure that as new technologies come out, if they're a right fit, we wanted to basically cannibalize our own client base, right? So, you take cloud, instead of selling a 20 grand email server, you're selling something at the time for, 200 or 300 euros a month with tiny margin. But my view was it was the right thing for the customer, and therefore it's the best right thing for us long term. And we've always had that philosophy. So we're looking at AI for the last couple of years. We were first on Hyper-V when it came out. We are probably one of the first full service MSPs that exist on the island of Ireland, and probably one of the most advanced MSPs that sit in the world today, because we want to make sure, as the customer from day one, the customer has all of the things that they need to run their business in a single place, that actually therefore all talk and work together. So anyway, long-winded answer to a short question.
Not at all, Kevin. And I want to jump in with a really big question early, and that is around what you said about almost cannibalizing your existing sort of client offerings before they peak and before they start to decline. So you're at the cutting edge of technology. I've heard your name and I've heard Nostra's name mentioned for years and years now, has been at the cutting edge and doing these sort of things. But in the industry, and you go to events like IT Nation and other community events, there is a resistance, isn't there, from MSPs to change, and yet we're in an industry that is always changing. So
Yeah.
what would you say to any MSPs listening who have got a really good thing going, and they're like, well, Kevin, why on earth would I change that? You know, you and I sort of know, because I've been there through the move from service to cloud when I ran my MSP. You've talked about virtualization rather than selling multiple tins to do the same thing. What about somebody who's really experiencing it now and making good money, doing really well, and saying, why on earth would I, change things when things are going well?
Well, so for me, it always comes back to, right, if our model has been, we want customers for 20 years. And we always look at things from a customer's perspective. Right? So as an example, our decision to put in HMC 4.5 back in 2008, 2007, we signed off, we went live in March of 08, right? 3 months before BPOS, by the way, right? And it was like, then it launched BPOS, and I'm like, God, and we had to do it again. So actually, I tell you that.
Let's explain what BPOS is, I guess, for the younger listeners. So
yeah, well, actually, I'll bring you through that, because I think that thought process will explain it. So we basically were selling email servers.
Yes.
Right. And we were making good money out of selling it. Now, if we put ourselves in the customer's shoes, and I go, if I build a cloud solution, so rather than selling a customer a single server, I'll buy a server and I'll share that out with multiple customers, right? Look, less money for me by customer, less margin for me by customer, so less overall impact. But stand in the customer's shoes, which would I prefer, right? And just go, and not even which would I prefer, because they probably prefer the on-premise, but which is better? If I understood all the facts, which is better. And for me, it was just a straightforward. If I understood all the facts, I wouldn't buy an email server. I'd be part of somebody else's bigger email system. And I used to say, like, be part of a banking email system and have 20 email addresses, rather than building an email system for 20 email addresses, which is going to be tiny and not as secure and robust. So we cannibalized, we stopped selling email servers in 2008. We haven't sold them since. And then we started going to customers and saying, buy this because it's the right thing. And that authentic way we look at that means that, yes, we make less margin, but we build huge long-term relationships with customers. Now, the more difficult transition, we put €250,000 into building the infrastructure. We put it on for people who remember IBM Blade Center. So we put it on an IBM Blade Center. And effectively, so what that is, it was like, you got a physical server. It looks like actually a SAN, so a rack of disks.
Yeah, like a RAID array.
Yeah, like a RAID array. And you threw in, so you could actually live throw in, extra storage and extra processing power, and just literally slot them in the same width as an MSA. So we put that in, and we had just invested $250,000, by the way, which was all of our money. And then Microsoft launched BPOS in July of 2008.
So that's Microsoft's business productivity online solution, if I remember correctly.
Correct, which is today known as Microsoft 365, right?
Yeah.
And so they launched that, and I'm sitting here with a €250,000 investment. I remember it so well. I think the conference was in Washington, right? So I'm in Washington. They announced this thing, and I'm sitting there going, this is better than ours, because they had invested €250 million in each data center at that time to launch it out. And I'm going, I've spent $250,000, they spent $250 million. Theirs is going to be better than ours. And then the clanger was, the price was, I think, €8.20, and our buy price for just a license was €6.50 at the time. So we had no margin left on the product. And I then literally had to make a really hard decision of, I can no longer morally sell my solution, because the same price solution is much better. We turned it off, and that server sat. We moved all of our customers to BPOS, so we were early on it. But we let that server sit. And I remember paying it $2,000 a month for, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after we took it out. We financed about $100K of it. And that finance cost coming out of our business. And now I'm making tiny margin on BPOS. Yeah. But it was the right thing for our customers. And our customers respected that always, that we would always do the right thing by them. And that decision meant that we became the first European company in cloud. When people started moving to it in 2013, 2014, we already had 50, 60 customers on. We understood it at a deeper level at every facet of our organization way before everybody else. if you think about that, we're 17 years on Microsoft's cloud platform this year. And that's a phenomenal position for us to be on. With 1,100 customers operating on it. We've no on-premise email, other than customers we took on and we would have migrated them off. We've had none for years. And that cannibalization of your client base gives you a long-term customer. And I always found customers were willing to redeploy that funds in most cases. And they'll go, okay, well, I was going to spend $5,000 on email or 10 grand on an email system. And now I'm going to spend 300 quid a month. So actually, maybe I'll put in a new boardroom solution for 8 grand or whatever. And if you put your customer at the heart of your decision making and always do the right thing, you will always have a customer. And if you always have a customer, you'll always have money. And if you always have money, you're always able to run a business. And that's kind of how I see it.
I love it. And I was actually at that event in Washington, D.C. when Microsoft announced that as well. I'm surprised our paths didn't cross back in the day there. But I remember being on doing a conference here in the UK. And I was one of the panelists. And we were talking about the move from, servers and the traditional managed services route. And I was one of the people like yourself who said, actually, I think we're not going to sell any more servers. It's going to move to the cloud, and it's going to take a big vendor's going to come along and start offering services, or hosted, we called it back then, didn't we, rather than cloud solutions. And I actually got booed by the audience. Yeah. Not for the first time, I should say, Kevin, but that's a different story. But yeah, because people didn't like the idea of, hey, you're going to cannibalize what we've got. But I'm reminded of Kodak when we talk about that. That's the most famous one, isn't it? If they had cannibalized their own solution and gone to the digital marketplace, they may be still around as a big player. So it's, as you say, there are massive upsides to it, but it can feel painful in the short term.
Yeah, and look, Netflix did it. They were the digital platform and got rid of their posted discs that they used to send out. And look, for me, it's about, and the flip of that, by the way, is as new technologies come out, I always stand in the shoes of the customer. So, over the years, lots of things have come out that we haven't adopted. Like at a point of probably about 8 or 10 years ago, there was a real push to put everyone into cloud desktop, or, to have all their desktop running in the cloud and, nothing on a PC, and just have a basic PC and connect in and use old hardware and everything else. And I remember sitting going, like, that's a horrible user experience. And like, there are instances, if I had loads of branches, there are definitely use cases for it. But a lot of MSPs were looking, going, God, I can make 20 quid a month margin per user per month. If I sell them a desktop, I make 120 quid or whatever it is, and therefore I'm going to do this, and I get 500 quid over the term of over the term that they would normally keep a PC. I stand in the customer's shoes about horrible user experience. We're not going to know. Simple as. It's just not the right thing, and we've never chased margin. We've never gone private cloud. As an example, private cloud for me is fine. I mean, there are use cases where it's important. And some regulated industries where you're not allowed to be in the public cloud. But by and large, a lot of private clouds are worse than public clouds at the same price, without the proper resilience and backup and compliance and huge margins. And we don't like that. I mean, I don't like the concept of somebody paying 1,000 a month for a cloud that's private versus 1,000 in public. But public are investing 600 quid or whatever the money is, and you're private, they're investing 50 out of your 1,000, and the customer is running risks that they're really not aware of. And obviously in the UK a couple of years ago, there was a very significant outage which cost an MSP ultimately its life. The business went under over it, where their private cloud had it was a breach or a failure. But you have to do the right thing. If you're going to do something, do it right. Stand in your customer's shoes, and when you stand in your customer's shoes, public cloud or whatever solution is the right thing. It's what people need to sell. And for me, MSPs that follow that model do really well.
Makes a lot of sense. And again, just as a side note on the virtual desktop, I and possibly some of our listeners are old enough to remember the horrible Citrix experience that we used to get back in the day, which, as you say, is a good fit for some environments. But yeah, I'm with you. I've never been entirely sold on that prospect. Let's move forward and let's talk about something that I alluded to at the top of the call, and something that's front of mind for every MSP at the moment, and that's cybersecurity. So I want to dive into something you were talking about on stage at IT Nation. You know, you were saying how Nostra's approach to cybersecurity offerings, again, slightly different to perhaps some MSPs. So can you explain what does that approach look like? And, you know, going from the point of view of putting the customer first there, tell us about that, because the customer doesn't always know what they need when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, so look, I suppose what we realized a couple of years ago was, customers really want to be secure, but to understand the risks that they have requires a level of technology understanding that people don't want to have, right? Again, I'm talking about business owners and CEOs and CFOs, etc. So our model has always been around simplifying the concept, simplifying the model. And ultimately, we basically took, a load of products that worked really well together, and we kind of package it up into a solution that our customers can literally go, here's security. And, it could be 15 or 16 different things that are included in that. And it just gives the customer a really simple understanding of where they stand. Because, historically, you go into a customer and you give 16 different things that you need to buy. So you need to buy your anti-spam, your antivirus, and all these other bits. And the customer goes, right, they almost get fatigued. I mean, if you give anyone a list of 20 things and say, do you want? They go, well, I won't take the 20, I'll take 14 of them. And that's a good level of security. But, security is not take 14, in a lot of ways, having 14 out of 20 layers of security means you've no security, because it only takes one entry point and you're dead in the water. And we've seen it time and time again where, people have gone, look, I've done an awful lot. We've invested, 10 grand or 100 grand or whatever a company has in security. We've a lot done and we're a lot better than where we were. But I always bring it back to a house. If you're putting security on a house, right, you can put your glass in, right? And let's say there's valuables in the house and there's loads of people who want to break in, right? So you've got glass, so that's a layer of security, right? But do you need bars on the windows, right? Do you need the bars to be properly held in, that they can't be pulled off with a car? Do you want a security box inside the house with the most valuable things in it? Do you want a security guard on the door? Do you want an alarm system if somebody actually gets in? And all of those can be related to different IT products. And what I find is, sometimes people put in an alarm system without putting windows in their house, right?
Yes, that's a good analogy. Yeah,
and that's the challenge. So, and like with an alarm system, it can only do what it can do. So if it goes off all the time, people ignore it, right? And it's important that people understand the layers. And for me, there's no longer a scenario where a customer shouldn't have everything. Now, by the way, all of our customers don't have everything, and we're still, you have to still get out to your customers and explain it to them. And it is a process. But I wouldn't like to sit as the director of a company that didn't have all of the layers of security that's required, because any one layer breached can breach your whole organization. And we've seen with AI and with automation how fast once somebody gets in through your front door, how quickly they can get around.
Yeah.
And the smallest vulnerability, particularly, and I would call it people who are running Windows 2008 servers and legacy tech, there are tools out there that can take passwords off of those in seconds, right? And if you're running those in your office, I mean, the vulnerability is that somebody breaks into your network and see that you're running Windows 2008 server, they'll get your admin password from that in seconds. And all of a sudden, they're moving around the network undetected. Yeah. And some of the scenes and stops people picking it up. And all of a sudden, they're into your backup and they go, right, well, let's disable this. And if you don't have an off-site immutable backup, then you're in trouble. And very quickly, things escalate. We've had calls on Sunday mornings from people going, we've no data and we've had no data since Tuesday. Can you guys jump in and help? And if 20 days of an outage where staff can't work, suppliers can't get on, they lose tons of customers, the impact is catastrophic. And people only realize how serious this thing is until afterwards. And MSPs have a responsibility predominantly to educate. I say to our team, if a customer has a cyber breach and we haven't told them of the risks, then we're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I know from speaking to the listeners of this show, MSPs from all across the world, cybersecurity, the number one thing on their mind, but cybersecurity, the number one thing that keeps MSP owners awake at night. Because if their clients don't take the things that are going to keep them safe, ultimately the MSP is going to be responsible. So would you give us an insight into what the stack or the toolkit that you use at Nostra looks like for the cybersecurity side of things?
Yeah, well, look, for us, so if I give an example, right? So we've multiple different stacks depending on the sector, right?
Sure.
So as an example, if you're in a financially regulated sector, we've got we've got managed antivirus, we've got anti-spam, we've got pen testing on a quarterly basis included in it. We've got server monitoring, heartbeat monitoring across all ports. We've got lateral movement detection systems. We've got what else have we got in there? Security awareness training, which actually is probably one of the more important parts of it.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, we have we typically supply, so depending on the scale of the company, we're also putting people in. So all of the systems we put in, like SIEM and SOC, would be included in as well. Right? But if we have a detection, right, which you do quite a lot, and obviously things are moving all the time. There is a remedial piece. So in Ireland, in regulated entities, they have 14 days once something is identified to close the gap. So in a regulated entity in Ireland, we will typically put somebody on site or remotely every 2 weeks, so every 14 days, to go through all of the issues that have our awarenesses that are out there to close those gaps. In non-regulated entities, again, depending on the customer's requirements, that might be once a month or once every 2 months. Or it might be, major issues are dealt with on the day. So it really depends. So what we're trying to do to a customer is go, here's all the services we do, and here's all the products that we have, get them all to work together so you really have an understanding. And probably what I would say is, for people who are listening, I think the most important thing, forget if you do nothing else, the most important thing is a mutable offsite backup.
Right.
Your immutable offsite backup is in your other office or in your Azure platform or whatever. That's not a mutable offsite backup. Right? A mutable offsite backup for me is it's in a third-party provider. Like for example, the Datto solution, like Legal or Chromius out there as well, or we use Datto, and your data is away in their data center. It's not linked to your network. Nobody can dial in and delete it out of there. And what you find is in a cyber attack where they recognize data is in existence and all the systems are actually backed up, they change the type of cyber attack that's there, right? And the worst type of cyber attack is when you have a full ransomware and your backup is gone.
Yeah.
So you end up with a much lesser solution or problem to deal with. So having that immutable offsite backup is the one thing that will mean I don't have to pay a ransom. And if people have customers without that, that's a huge, huge mark for me. The second piece is, you have to follow through. Obviously, we've seen lots of firewall vendors being breached in the last couple of years and have had challenges. So, those alerts from the firewall vendors have to be actioned quickly. And there's been a couple. We're predominantly a SonicWall partner, and the last couple of years, last year they've had quite a number of CVEs. And they're serious. And again, we will react to those really fast and get out to all of our customers and make sure that we have that closed down really quickly. But I think one of the challenges as I talk to other MSPs is, they are happy once they have 1 or 2 or 3 security products into a customer. And for me, I would struggle to sleep at night if a customer didn't know the risks that they're carrying.
Yes.
And having those hard conversations are important. It doesn't be a bad conversation, but you do have a job to show people in the mirror where they stand. And one of the things that we see by buying MSPs is often there's a fear of going out because I've been their MSP for 10 years, and actually I can't go out and tell them that it's all wrong and we have no security because that's really bad. But actually, somebody's going to do it. So go back to the cannibalizing. So if we go out and tell 10 customers, 9.5 of them should stay, and you'll get all the security business, and 1 or half of customer per 10 will leave and they go, I'm really upset how you've done it. But your revenue will go up, your security will be better, and the customer that leaves will go somewhere else and get proper security, and they'll win, and it ultimately ends up in a win for everyone. So
yeah. And as you say, you alluded to the MSP that I was going to say got caught out, but perhaps that's unfair language. But suffered a breach, and that MSP is no longer around anymore. So it's a really big issue. So for anybody who's feeling nervous about speaking to their clients, and the approach that I talk about is, well, you can go to them and say, well, that was right for the time, but things have moved on since then, and so we want to keep you safe and secure. So you mentioned Datto in there for your offsite backup, your mutable backups. Who are some of the other names that you work with, vendors and things of that nature?
Because of the nature of our business and the scale of it, and through M&A, we probably work with most of them. But we are a big partner of Kaseya. We're a big partner of the Datto, same company. We work with companies like Huntress. We work with companies like WebRoot. We work with companies like InSoc. Actually, they've rebranded recently, but they're again a great SIEM and SOC provider. We work with companies like Barracuda. So we probably have, on our security vendor list, we probably have 15 or 20 vendors there. Yeah. And for me, and this is probably an important point, right? Lots of people put a huge amount of effort and time into, I'm gonna spend 6 months trying to decide which security awareness training partner I'm gonna go with, which antivirus training partner I'm gonna go with. But the reality is, as long as they're MSP focused or MSP centric, right? Where I think things go wrong is when you get somebody not MSP centric, so they can't central dashboards, etc. But actually, they're probably all within a reasonable pace of maturity. So I would say it's which ones can you work with best? Which ones have the best on the ground partnerships that are near you? Which ones work best with your core stack? And then you're kind of working out. So like we would go. My philosophy has always been, let's say, we use Autotask for our PSA tool. So the first question is, what works best with Autotask? What has the integration? Because something that integrates with what you already have will be far better than something that is better as a product but doesn't integrate. And you can spend so much time trying to put in the best of the best of the best. But the reality is, if you have a really good stack that work really, really well together, and you manage it properly, and you have proper dashboards, and you have proper reporting, that gives you visibility. Like what I would say is, we have not had a significant cyber breach in any of our customers that have full security stack from us. And I'm sure lots of people on the call would look at elements of our stack and say, God, that's not good enough product. Often we'll acquire a business and they're going, oh, no, this is much better than what you guys are currently using. And we go, well, actually, that doesn't support central dashboard. It doesn't support an API into a billing system. It doesn't do all of these things. Yes, it's a better product, but it can't scale and it can't integrate. So having that kind of mindset of not about the product, it's about how it works in your stack, it's about how it fits, how it plugs in. And I would say, you can knock 20% of the features off. If it integrates properly, you'll get better result out of it, and your customers will win.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that, because it is a really crowded cybersecurity market at the moment. You've mentioned a lot of the good names that are there. I want to pick up on one that you mentioned that seems to be a recurring theme with some of our podcast guests of late, Huntress. Tell us about the relationship with Huntress. Why did they jump out to you? How does that relationship look in terms of operationally?
Look, it's early days, right? It's early days, and look, so we had last August, September, so we were one of SonicWall's biggest partners in Europe, and when the CVE came out and we ultimately had to go to 1,100 firewalls or 1,200 firewalls, whatever it was at the time, and do our analysis and see if anyone had been breached or people had got in. Huntress at that time offered to come in and assist us through that journey.
Wow.
So they had a proactive reach out, and that was well received. Our security team have looked at it and been analysing it. It is early days, and I would say we expect to have a very strong long-term relationship. I'm not in a position at this stage to stand here and say, yeah, we have it across our full client base. Our security team, or what I say is our security team, are very happy with it. We've been in a select number of customers. It's working well, it's delivering, and it's our intention to add it to our stack. But that final decision is still with our innovation team.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I said I met you at IT Nation, saw you speak there. You've talked about the close relationship with Datto. Every vendor I speak to that you partner with, well, your name comes up in conversation as one of their favourite partners. So you must be doing something right here, Kevin. And Huntress was the same. Spoke to Nick O'Donovan, one of your countrymen, and the team there rave about how easy it is to work with you guys across at Nostra. So you are. What does that relationship look like? The vendor relationship, because I know from experience it is very key to a business like Nostra growing behind your limitations. What sort of effort do you put into maintaining and growing those vendor relationships?
So for me, what I'd say, and you might pick it up for me. Look, I say things as they are, right? And I've been in customer meetings when the customer says to me, "Look, I got a proposal for one of your guys for this solution. What do you think?" And I look and say, it doesn't sit right with me. I don't feel that's something that you need. I'm coming to it more from a business perspective, right? And I'd be saying, look, if I was you, I'd probably hold off, or I'd move away from it, or I'd move to a SaaS. Like, you give a simple example. I got with a customer recently, and we had a quote into them to put in a new on-premise physical server infrastructure because their application didn't support the cloud and didn't support Azure in any way. It required USB connectivity to certain devices, right? Big business. And it was reasonable sized piece of work. They asked me for my opinion. I said, look, that is the right technical solution, but the right thing for the business is something different. It's actually, I think you need to move ERP provider. What you have is archaic. You're going to put in investment here, quite significant amount of money, and you're going to get 5 years out of it. And you're effectively going to tie your business to what is an archaic system. I said, you don't have live dashboards, right? And I brought them up and showed them how we've got live information. We can see sales numbers on the day. We can have a real pulse of how our organization is doing. And they're kind of, okay, that's really interesting. So they then moved to a full SaaS-based solution through, we don't currently provide ERP, but they went and got an ERP partner, actually UK business, and moved their application to it, of which Nostra got zero revenue out of that, because that's where it is. So I'm very direct with people. I don't ever want business that we shouldn't have. Our rule in Nostra is don't sell something to a customer that you wouldn't sell to a family member, assuming you like the family member.
That's a different podcast, yeah.
So the same with vendors, like if I have a problem with a vendor, I'll tell them. If I'm concerned about a vendor, I'll tell them. And not ever in an aggressive way. I'll tell them where they stand, and they always know where they stand. And I won't endorse something unless I really, really like it, and I know it, and I know it's worked, and I've proven it. So I make sure that the vendors are delivering for us and our customers. And I will take a zero margin amazing product over a 90% margin product that I don't like. And for me, it's all about the customer experience and coming back from that. So for us to give our customers access to a vendor requires us to have huge trust in that vendor.
Yeah.
And trust is built by having an open two-way relationship. So, if I'll say to a vendor, look, if you're working with anyone in our business and you're getting blocked and there's challenges or whatever, come back and talk to me straight away. We've actually, vendor I will mention, Pax8, have been really good, and they're scaling really fast, and that's not whatever the challenge is. But they've really engaged when we've given them feedback, and they've been a really good partner, even though it hasn't been seamless onboarding with them. But you can see where they're going, and we really enjoy being on that journey with them. And their events are particularly impressive as well. So when I look at different vendors and partners, I'm looking for the people who have an eye to the future, don't really have an interest in working with somebody who has a product that they're not investing in. They're trying to sweat the asset over long term, because in tech space that doesn't work. And having those, we're happy to sit in advisory boards. We're on the Kaseya advisory board. We're on, I think we're on the Sonic one, which you could be misquoting that, but I think we're on that. Like, we're on a lot of those vendor advisory boards, giving them insights into what they can do and actually helping to shape what the future looks like. And look, we don't always get it right, but we'll always be honest with our partners, customers, and vendors. And ultimately that helps get us to the right long-term solution every time.
Yeah, I'm interested when you said about Huntress, stepping in, you built that relationship. They helped you out with the Sonic Wall side of things. So do you use the Huntress SOC and SIEM at the moment for clients?
So for some of them, yes. So again, I'm not close enough to tell you exactly what we're using, but
Sure,
yes, the thing is it's the SOC, and I'm not actually sure what their status is at SIEM. I wouldn't be that close to it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we've rolled it out to a number of customers. We've been using it there for a couple of months. All feedback so far to me has been very positive. And my understanding is, in the next couple of weeks, they're going to make a decision that it's going to be part of our permanent stack, in which case it'll go out to the full client base. And at that point, then, I'll probably get heavily involved and really get in to understand it. But no, I mean, what I would say is there's certainly an energized company that's really trying to connect with partners and help. And obviously, people like Nick know the partner ecosystem and everyone in it really, really well. So, those things help, and they're investing in the region.
Yeah. And whether it's Huntress or any other SOC or SIEM solution, I'm intrigued. Do you use, when you have conversations with clients, is this part of a behind the scenes sort of layer that you add on, or are you open with clients about what solutions that you're using to keep them safe?
Oh yeah, no, we're fully transparent always. Yeah. No, we if we go all the way back, I mean, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we started looking at SIEM and SOC through Scout, which was bought by Barracuda. But you think the cost of it back then, it's probably 80% cheaper today for a SIEM and SOC than it was back in 2014, 2013. So it's a significant, the market was just starting back then, and now it's much more mature. So at the starting point, it was a very expensive thing for customers. And our view at that point is we build with a partner. When it makes sense, then we'll build our own SIEM and SOC. But as the price comes down, it makes less and less sense to do it. And as long as you have a good partner delivering a good service, why change it when, again, if we stand in the customer's shoes, if we built our own, would we deliver a better service? Mm-hmm. And that's a yes or no. If it's a yes, then we can look at, does it make financial sense? And that might be a no. So we always want to look at that kind of balance. So yeah, we've always been fully transparent, but our invoices are, particularly in the last couple of years, we brand everything under a Nostra product.
Good, yeah.
And then ultimately behind the scenes, the full transparency, but we have the ability to swap out those products as and when we need to, predominantly when we find something that moves the needle. So we've changed our antivirus provider probably 3 times in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I would suspect we're going to be changing it in the near future as well, because, the evolution in that AV, additional things that they're doing today makes a huge leap forward, and it's probably one of the areas of huge innovation.
Yeah. So trust is obviously a key factor for you. Trust with your clients trusting you, trust with your vendors, and vice versa. There's going to be MSPs listening to this, Kevin, who are like deeply impressed by your cybersecurity stack, by your approach towards keeping your clients safe. And they're probably going to be going away from this conversation with some ideas saying, we need to up our game here. We need to be a little bit more Nostra with things. What advice would you give to those MSPs listening on adopting cutting edge and new cybersecurity tools, but without overwhelming their internal team? Because you and I both know, as MSP owners, engineers can sometimes push back, aren't they, and say, well, we've already got too much going on, and now you're giving us another tool. What advice would you give to MSPs on overcoming that overwhelm?
So the first thing I'd say is it's important to, so, okay, well, if I go all the way back, right, and let's say you're an MSP with, between 10 and 40 people. So the first thing is, what is it you're trying to actually achieve? And I mentioned a bit about this, the IT Nation piece is, for me, it starts with my why, right? What am I trying to do? So am I trying to be an MSP with the same size I am for the next 10 years, and then I'm going to, pass the business on to my kids? Or am I going to grow double the size of my MSP in the next 10 years? Or do I want to exit in the next 12 months, right? So the first thing is, start with your why. Why are you getting up every morning and going to work? Once you know that, then that's going to help you decide what you want to do. So first of all, if you're going to stay in business for the next 10 years, you need to get your tech stack right, because you won't be in business for the next 10 years. Right? So that's an absolute de facto. And if you don't have the skills to do it today, you need to hire an in, right? And, basically you need to find somebody who understands security at a high level. And you need a separate person to be the security person in your business. So they should help you pick out your stack, price it up, work with your sales team to deploy it, and go customer by customer. And I would say, if you, let's just say you've got 50 customers, then allow yourself 3 months to define your stack, and in 12 months from that to get your 50 customers up and running on it or propose out, which is one customer a week for a year, right? So how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? It's a simple answer, right? And I think MSPs who, if you decide, if you're planning on selling your business and you want to do that now, then, you're not going to be able to build a security stack in the next 12 or 18 months that's going to add any material value. So therefore, you want to make sure you got your basics covered. I would say the urgent pieces for those that don't have it, immutable cloud backup, absolutely mission critical. Let's get that done. The second piece I would say is get your basics right. So forget about new products, right? Are you patching your firewalls? Are all your firewalls VPNs on have 2FA enabled? Have you got 2FA across all your Microsoft tenancies? Is your Microsoft security score and your customers at 75% or above? Those are things that are today within your control. And, if somebody was to leave this and want to do a quick health check, right? So I would say take 2 of your top 10 customers, 2 of your bottom 10 customers, and 2 of your mid-levels. So take 6 customers. Have they immutable offsite backup? Have they a security score above 75%? Have you patched their firewalls recently? Have they got 2FA across different metrics? And that will give you a finger in the air analysis of where you currently stand. And if you don't have a security score in that region, if you don't have 2FA, if you don't have patching in place across your networks, you're running, and you don't have immutable backup, you're running a risk, which I would define as absolutely enormous. For me, I would be going, we are going to run a webinar for our customers tomorrow and say, we want everyone to do immutable backup, so I'm able to get some sleep again, right?
Yeah.
But, and these are important things, and your customers won't thank you for not telling them. I always say it's a much easier hard conversation to say these are your risks than in 3 months' time going, well, you didn't have immutable backup. I've never even heard of it. You never proposed offsite backup. And saying I sent you an email 12 months ago saying we're recommending online backup and you never joined the webinar just doesn't cut it. The other piece, I'm just a piece, right? So, if people are watching this on video, I'm not sure if it is going to be a video, but I'm sitting here in a suit, right? And a lot of people look at a suit in today's world, right? Particularly in IT terms, and they're going, that's kind of archaic, old fashioned, right? Part of me feels that companies and the MSPs have slipped too far away from what they were 5 and 6 years ago. There is an element of, particularly I see lots of MSPs have really adopted massive remote working. And then I would say through due diligence, we see a lot of those companies with much higher staff turnover than other entities and other businesses. We see customer turnover and churn in those customers at a higher rate than other businesses. So, I would say, going back to some of the traditions, I mean, I wear a suit actually because I love going home and taking it off. And then I'm switched off into home mode.
Psychologically, you move between work and home. Yeah.
Yeah, and I only went back to that this year, right? We're an in-office organization. We've got 3 big offices in Ireland, and we're about to go into the UK market. We're looking for UK acquisitions at the moment. We're having lots of coffees, but that's a big focus of mine. I'm spending a lot of time over there. I love getting LinkedIn messages from people going, "Here, listen, when you're across next, grab me for a coffee." And and for me, being an MSP can be a lonely place. It can be a tough place, right? And you're dealing with cyber attacks, you're dealing with technology issues, you're dealing with outages. Sometimes you're dealing with things outside your control or inside your control. Doing it from your house is really lonely, right? Like I Nostra about 400 people in the business, and I spend all my time in the offices or with customers. They're the only 2 places you'll find me, and I just love the energy that we get from each other, and the crack and the nights out and the fun and the traveling even across the country in a car with somebody and learned about them, and a lot of that has gone from MSPs, and I think MSPs need to go back to actually creating that culture in their organization, really becoming a team, working together to make the customers better, but actually going back to enjoying it. I mean, who wants to sit and work for 8.5 hours a day? I like to work for 8.5 hours, but I like to spend time with people. We physically met, but it's so much nicer to meet somebody in person, physically shake their hand, than actually sitting on a Teams call and chatting to them. And I would love to see more MSPs, and lots of them are now, but more of them actually coming back to that traditional, what are we about? Because are we a business that's purely here to serve customers, or are we here to serve our staff? And happy staff serve happier customers. And in my experience, while people object to coming back to the office in the short term, very quickly they go, "Jesus, actually, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm going down to play pool in the canteen, and I'm going out for a pint tonight with somebody." And and friendships happen in business, and we become lifetime friends of our colleagues. I've yet to meet 2 people who met remotely and have become great friends, and they're inviting each other to their weddings, right? But actually, my wedding was full of people I used to work with, and I think they're really important things. Technically, I met my wife through work, right?
Did you?
So,
wow.
Yeah, and I just think, I think as a point, MSPs, really important to be technical. It's really important to be great, but actually, it's really important to. And by the way, I'm not criticizing remote working. We've got a guy, Richard, working in Malta for the last 10 or 12 years through, and he's absolutely superb. And we've got people who work remotely, but if you're 3.5 kilometers from your office and you're working remotely, that's a sign that there's a problem. And for me, happy staff are happy customers, and happy customers is a profitable business, and that's a cycle. And one of the things that employers have to see as their role is to actually create environments where friendships can be born and people can get on and actually enjoy themselves. And 7.5 hours on Teams calls every day can be really brilliantly work efficient, but people are burnout. In an office, you might have 5 hours and 5.5 hours of work, but the little 5-minute conversations here and there, and canteen solutions, and people going out for lunch together, they're all really important, but they're not lasting in today's world.
Yeah, you make a really powerful argument for that as well. And I know there's going to be some MSPs listening and go, "No, that's not where we're going to go with it." But the proof of the pudding is what you have built at Nostra. And I want to change tacks a little bit from cybersecurity and talk about the acquisitions that you've made. So you alluded to that earlier. So if I'm right in my research, you've made 10 acquisitions to date. You're talking about moving in to the UK as well. What's the strategy behind the acquisitions you made? And secondly, what do you look for in the companies that you acquire? I'm guessing that culture is a part of that.
Yeah, look, it is. And actually, just to crystallize that last point, we wouldn't buy a fully remote MSP. What are you buying? How do you get even everyone together to meet them? How do you get them to buy into what you're trying to do? So it definitely wouldn't be something we would even consider looking at. We would walk away at the initial IM stage. It doesn't because the tangible asset you're buying is a group of people who all work from home that don't meet each other. And you actually, for me, magic is created when people in a room. You put 6 people in any room, they will solve any problem. You put 6 people on the same Teams call, same people, same problem, you will have 6 people leave with a ton of actions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference, right? Magic happens when people are together. Anyway, what do we buy, right? So we if I start at the beginning, right? I think I mentioned actually when we did our event in IT Nation that we were an accidental acquirer of companies. The first business we bought was a business called Tech Department 10 years ago now, and Kieran McLean, the guy who sold it, I won't say he beat me into buying it off him, but he probably would be agreeing with me. And I met Kieran because one of his employees joined our business and rang a load of his customers and asked them to come to us. And he rang me and said, "This is what my ex-employee did in your office today," and he was quite angry. And I said to him, "Not with my direction. I'm going to tell him to stop instantly. And if any of the customers say that they're unhappy and they want to move across, I'll send you back the information. We won't quote them, and we'll get it done." And he met me the next day and says, "Do you want to buy my business?" Right?
Wow.
I have no money. And he says, "Well, I'll fund it for you." And we bought his business pretty quickly, actually, only a couple of weeks. It was a small business. But that business was about 800,000 euros a year, break-even business, couple of employees, and it's probably 3-4 million in our revenue today, 10 years later. And it's a fantastic example. We basically, one customer in it who I won't mention, but they were doing 10, 15 grand a year in service, actually changing an autoloader backup tape. So the engineer was going in every Friday, changing all the tapes. And shortly after we bought the business, the company rang us and said, "We've lost a load of our IT guys. Is there any chance you can step in as a short-term basis and put some of your guys who know our site because they change the backups?" And we 10 years later, we're getting, probably 500,000, 750,000 a year off that business still. And it's been a phenomenal journey. And the people who we got from that deal, a couple of them are still with us. And it just was a fabulous opportunity. In 2008, when we bought our second business, another MSP, again, sub $1 million. It wasn't a particularly good deal for us in the end, but a lot of lessons learned, and we knew then what was important for us. And then in 2020, we bought a business called Brandon Global, which was an MSP that had a big security arm, and we had a big security arm, but they were known as a security company and we weren't. And actually, the two security businesses joined together created a really good piece of noise for us, but actually customers then started seeing us as a security company, and it was a phenomenal deal. 21, then we bought a business called Enclave, and it was again a super MSP, relatively small client base, but very high end, a lot of regulated customers in it, financial services predominantly, and and that business was we probably doubled that inside of 18 months, 2 years. And I would say that team, or I'm not sure if anyone has ever left from that business since it joined. And then we kind of stood back, and in that 4 deals, we had bought about 10 million, and we were about, if we take the starting point, we were 5 million. We bought 10 million, so it's 15, but the business was then trading at 25 million. Right. And over kind of a 4-year period, we said, okay, well, why don't we look at this in a much more strategic way? My brother Barry stepped into the managing director role. I stepped to CEO role. So what does that mean? That means basically I stopped managing everything and just started managing sales and acquisitions, and that gave me time. And then Barry ran everything else. So we almost defined it, if you're standing back to back, I was looking out the door and how can we get more in, and he's looking at everything inside the front door, and that relationship has worked phenomenally well for the two of us. And then we bought so we took a year to integrate everything, get them understood in 22, and then between 23 and 24 we did 6 deals, and we bought a couple of new product sets. So we bought a company that delivered internet connectivity to businesses. It was a business that we partnered with for 10 years, and they provided us with our own connectivity. And we just liked the way they worked. We could ring them and go, here, we have a customer in, here's their air code or their postcode, and can you get what connectivity again? 10 minutes later, we get a call back with 3 options. Here's what they are. We can do this lead time, that delivery. And it was just done. So we bought that business, and that's been a huge success. They've started really working with a lot of our customers and doing amazing work around taking what wasn't our business, bringing it into our existing client base. Then we bought a Xerox print partner. We go, well, why on earth would you buy a print business in a declining market? And actually, it's quite simple. We did an analysis of our tickets in our service, and the most common single word in our entire tickets for 2022 was the word print.
Printer, yeah.
Did not sell printers, right? But it's the most common. Can't print, set up this printer, move that, add this printer, wrong paper size, whatever it was. We were always getting the tickets, but we might as well get the revenue for it. So we bought Xerox because they have a European delivery mechanism, the European support directly, and effectively we could deliver Xerox printers, which are brilliant, but we could deliver them to any customer anywhere in Europe. We could deploy them on a consistent basis. We could support them, manage them, and we felt that was the best model for us. It's worked really, really well. And then we the last piece of the puzzle for us was around video conferencing. So lots of our customers had big video conferencing systems, and if it was more than a base entry solution, we would use different external partners. And again, we had good partners, but we thought, well, what's the right thing? So we found a business which we define as the kind of premium provider in Ireland, and we acquired a business called Spectrum AV, now known as Nostra AV, and it literally kicks out boardrooms and conference centres, and we've got some amazing customers that come in through that. So we ultimately have acquired additional services which we can supply to all of our customers, and we've new customers to win MSP business in, but also we acquire additional geography. So when we're acquiring an MSP, we're buying geography. When we're acquiring a new product, we're widening our product set. And probably for us, the next couple of iterations of that, as we move to the UK, which is our primary focus now, we're looking for, MSPs between the smallest side between 3 million sterling and 20 million sterling, and businesses where the owners want to exit and the businesses where the owners want to stay on. And actually, we're looking for a business that's really going to be the core of Nostra in the UK. And that first one is a really, really important one for us. And we want to be able to emulate our model of, really high client retention, really high staff retention. We're, build offices, and our intention is to build them in all the major cities over the next 10 years in the UK, and to become the de facto MSP in Europe, where we are the biggest, best, highest retention rate, best staff retention rate, best place to work, all of those other things. And that's what we want to be. We want to be the biggest in Europe in the short term. We want to be the biggest in the world long term.
I want to talk that, first of all, that is an incredible story. So much to unpick there. And I want to talk about the geographic expansion a little bit more shortly. But it's interesting to me, you talked about mergers and acquisitions there. And most MSPs think about, M&A being, we're going to acquire another MSP and we're going to grow our client base that way. You've almost gone sideways with some of those acquisitions, haven't you, where you've acquired skill sets or you've acquired product sets or something along those lines. So that really fascinates me. But, for the most part, it sounds as though that's been a wild success for you, that strategy of acquiring other companies, but not without its challenges. So you mentioned, I think it was the second company, you said, with hindsight, that probably, wasn't so great for you. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you find when you go and start conversations with MSPs about acquisitions? What are the red flags for you that what you've learned over the years that you look and go, this isn't going to work for us, we're going to step away from this deal?
Yeah, so I would say, so first of all, on the strategy side, our strategy has, I'll go back to my earlier point, it's about standing in your customer's shoes.
Right.
So what is our customer's pain point? Can that fit in and be part of our solution? And if the answer is yes, then we're open to acquiring a business that would fix that that issue. And so when we want to acquire in skill sets that aren't natural to us, but only if they're relevant to our existing client base. So, if you came to me and said, there's a company that does banking software and they're up for sale, that's not relevant, because that's not relevant to the majority of my customers. It's relevant to about 15%, but that's niche. So when we acquire a business, does every customer we have need an internet connection? Yes. Okay, that's relevant. Does every customer we have need a print? Yes. Does every customer we have use video conferencing? Yes. So we will look at things like, for argument's Power BI and those tools, and acquiring those types of companies. We do some of it in-house, but to go and really seriously at it, we'll look at that. We will look at an ERP acquisition in the next 12 or 18 months to bring that skill set in, so we'll do those types of things. So in terms of going back to your second part of the question around red flags, I think one of the most important things is, why is the seller wanting to sell? And where things go wrong is when a business is actually on the downward spiral and the seller is a very willing, urgent, action-orientated seller. That's a red flag, which we would now identify, which we didn't in the early days. What I would also say is that, if a business, for me, staff turnover and customer turnover are serious red flags. So, the worst of the worst MSPs have 75% client retention.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to annoy your customers enough that they actually exit, right? So we want to see client retention really high. And if not, we want to understand why it's not, right? And we want to get behind it. If staff turnover is high, client turnover is high. Staff turnover is low, client turnover is high. Right? And they're intrinsically linked in every deal we've ever looked at. So, if staff turnover is high, it's a sign of a culture problem. And there are things that can be hard to fix after the fact. I would say when we see things like, customers overcharging for services, that's a red flag, because, you have to do the right thing by customers. And we often see where, people are, like, we've seen one example of a customer that had a tiny cost of a private cloud and a massive revenue for private cloud. And just by looking at the numbers, you could see the investment wasn't there at all. We won't pursue a transaction like that. So the most important thing I would say is that the owner of the business and you are aligned, and you get on. If you don't get on with the owner, the likelihood is you're not going to get on with the employees, right? And people hire people who are like themselves in any business. So, if you've an owner, and there's nothing wrong, I'm just saying there's two different personality types, nothing wrong with either type. But if you don't have a good relationship with the owner and you don't get on with them, it's unlikely that you will be able to lead their team, and you'll probably have high staff turnover. So for me, I try to get the alignment with the owner. I like the owner to explain to me very honestly what they're after. I want to exit because I'm 60 and I want to spend some time with my family and before it's too late, or I want to retire because I hate the MSP business and that's what I want to do, or it's worth X amount, is worth 5 million now, and that's all I need for retirement. So I'd like to get the cash off the table, but I want to keep running it. They're probably my favorite ones, to be fair. Yeah. Because the owner then stays on and helps you drive on the business. And we have a lot of owners still in our business who've joined us, and lead. Our CTO is an ex-business owner here. Our chief of staff is the next business owner here. Our head of compliance is the next business owner here. And, we can give them divisional roles, which are often bigger than the businesses that they ran before, and bring them on the accelerated journey. So, I would say, in terms of what an MSP needs to do is read your data. What is your staff turnover? If you don't know what it is, get it. If it's higher than 20%, you probably have an issue, and you need to look at what the cultural issue is and fix it. And sometimes that can be one person, it's a problem, or it can be a systemic issue, or you might be the problem. And then, what's your staff turnover and why are they leaving, and what's the product set that you have, and is it delivering for your customers, and do you have private cloud, and is it properly invested? If it's not, then that's a red flag. When we see private cloud, I would say if somebody has a private cloud and they're spending 20 grand a month and they're getting 300 grand a month, exaggerating the scenario, right? But, anyone buying that will go, well, we need to properly invest in that and bring it to 200 grand a month to spend to actually do it properly. So therefore, you're not going to get the value from that, even though you're actually getting it. So you have to do the right thing. That's probably the main points, yeah.
Yeah, this is absolute gold, Kevin. And I know there's going to be lots of people listening to this while they're out walking the dog or while they're driving in the car or whatever, and thinking, this is brilliant. I've got to make notes here. Don't worry, listeners. We've got you back. We're going to do a blog post all around this because I knew before we had the conversation with Kevin, there would be so much value from this. So thank you, Kevin. I want to change tact a little bit here. I want to talk about you as a business leader. If I may. So I was looking back, you were recognised as an EY Entrepreneur of the Year finalist in 2017. EY, a company very familiar to me. I used to work there back in the day, in fact, before I started my MSP career. How would you describe your leadership style? What led to you being recognised in that way?
Well, I suppose if I was being totally honest, what led to me being recognised in that way is I applied for it.
And why not? And why not?
Yeah. Well, the EY Entrepreneurial Program is something that I aspired. Actually, I remember watching Dennis O'Brien win in I think it was 1996, and I was 16 at the time. I was watching the TV, and my dad was sitting there, and he had it on, and I was watching, and I was going, wow. And my dad was just so like, that is the pinnacle of what it is, right? And I Nostra had scaled and been through some very difficult times. And I mentioned the cloud. We'd invested $250,000 at the very start in our HMC servers. As a result of that, and as a result of our strategy, we weren't funded enough to do the things I wanted to do, and we really struggled financially from 2008, end of 2008, until about 2012, 2013. And I mean, daily cash calls, daily, I was out collecting money, we're ringing customers, can we have an early payment for this? We were almost saying, if you're ordering this, I might need to check off you in the meeting so as I can actually buy and order the kit. So, really, really difficult time. And we came through that. We did a couple of acquisitions. They could see we had gone from $1.5 million in 2013, I think, up to, and we did 6.5 or 7 million the year before I was nominated in 2016. So we're in 17. And I had happened to maintain my team. The people who were with it from the start stayed with us. We managed to keep all stakeholders, the people, the shareholders, the advisors, the customers, the staff, all on board in what was a extremely turbulent time. Best way I would describe it is, we built the chassis of a car, and we started moving as we were building it, and then
yes, yeah,
and then we got 4 punctures and a wheel came off, and we didn't have an ability to stop, so we had to keep trying to repair the car while we were trying to get going, and we did that for 5 full years. And being honest with you, it was the best MBA school that I could have ever imagined. It was extremely difficult. It was pushed me to my absolute limits. And in 2009, at what I would define as rock bottom, I remember in January of that year, we were just out of cash and everything was gone, and we cut staff salaries, and our revenue had gone from 300 grand a month to 30 grand a month as a result of the recession, where we were selling again big VMware solutions at 50 or 100 grand a pop, and they just stopped happening. And I was like, somebody said to me, look, you need to get your head right. So, and to do that, you take steps. So I started going to the gym every morning. So still do it today, train at 6 every morning, started eating properly, started making sure that I'm doing the things every day to keep me operational and going. I set a goal at the end of 2009 to become Ireland's largest company. And it was comical at the time because we were at, 800 grand revenue and 200 grand loss. And million quid in debts, and I'm setting this objective, and I'm trying to see if I can see it there, but I actually have it in a book if you want to see it. And I wrote out a vision board, and it's become Ireland's largest company by 2050. And that was the journey we went on back then. And our posters, which are up all around the office, have, ultimately our objective as a company is to help 1 million people. And that's not customers, by the way. It is to a certain extent, but when I say help 1 million people, we would like our team over the years to be able to get mortgages and get houses, and and to be able to have families and bring them up, and to come join Nostra and stay with us, or come and leave in a better position than they started, where we'll educate them and train them. And we genuinely have a purpose, of making every day a stepping stone to making everyone who works in our business lives better. And we want to really make a difference in the world, and that is very much at the core of our organization. And to achieve those massive goals, we have to work hard. We have to have the right people. We have to work with people, and it means that if somebody has a challenge, we'll work with them. If somebody isn't performing, we'll give them more chances than other organizations would. And it's our objective always to manage people in and not manage them out. And really to, as I look at the business, you ask me what my style is. My style is, how can I help you? Right. So what is your challenge? What is stopping you from being the best version of yourself? And I love to see people transform. I love to see people, join our business as an intern, and 5 years later they're a sales manager, and or somebody join as a junior engineer, and now they're leading teams. And yesterday we had 2 people, one who joined directly and one who came in through an acquisition, actually back in 2018. And those 2 guys were promoted to managers of our patrol services team, and started in that on Monday. And it's just gone, like, I love to see that, 2 people I massively respect. And I love when somebody knocks on my door and says, here it is, I have an idea. And one of those guys came into me yesterday, and it was brilliant. He came in and said, here's a customer, a supplier of one of our customers, a great product, I really like working with it. I think you should go and meet them, because that's relevant in a lot of our customers, and we should have some kind of partnership with them. And actually, I mentioned to them in passing, and they'd love to be more in the south, and they're in the north at the moment, and they'll help refer us into their customers, and we'll do a reciprocal agreement. And it was just a 5-minute great chat with them, and that's what doesn't happen in a remote world.
Yeah, that's such a remarkable story. And thank you, Kevin, for sharing so openly and honestly. I try to shine a light on high achievers, people like yourself on the podcast, but we want the behind the scenes, because it's easy for people listening to podcasts like this to go, oh, there's somebody at the top of the mountain, or getting towards the top of the mountain, but they're naturals at this. You described that period that was so tough for you, the stumbling blocks, and how you've turned it around. And thank you so much for that, because I'm not alone in thinking this. There's going to be so many people listening to that who are perhaps in that stage at the moment and feel like they're banging the head against a brick wall, or feel like giving up. And so to know that there's people like yourself who have pushed through there is incredible. And one thing, a follow-up question on that, I consider you a high achiever, as do many within the industry, but it's very inspirational to hear what you're doing. How do you maintain that enthusiasm? How do you maintain that energy to keep going forward, especially when you face such challenges there? So how do you keep that going now?
So look, it comes back to purpose. So, what's your purpose? And just for those people who are listening and struggling, right? Let me just give you the stats and numbers of my January 2009 position. Nostra was minus €1 million in assets, with 0 money in the bank, 50 grand in debtors. We had just cut salaries by 20%. We had about 30 grand a month of revenue, and we were losing 20 grand a month, right? Wow. So bleak position. We also owed quite a bit of money to revenue, and revenue can obviously have an ability to close you down if they feel that that's important, and we weren't even in a position to pay them. So that was my January 1st 09. Personally, I had invested heavily in the property market in my 20s, and I was, I at one point, I had €2 million worth of property with about £1.5 million of debt. And by January 2009, I had 600 grand of property with £1.5 million of debt and no tenants, because all of my properties were rented out to builders who were pulled out of Ireland because there was no more building. And I had, empty houses, and the interest rates had gone up. So I'd gone from like 4 grand a month of repayments and 5 grand in rent to 8 grand a month of repayments and no rent at the same point that my business was down. So that was my January 2009 position. And what I would say is, put one foot in front of the other was my methodology. I got heavily into doing a meditation every day. People might think that's mad, but I still do it every day.
Not at all, Kevin. I'm a big meditator, and I've actually said we're coming up to about 200 of these type of conversations that I've had with high achievers like yourself. Meditation tends to be a thread throughout this. And we used to say on the show, if that sounds woo-woo to people or whatever, I'm beyond that, and I'm going to stop apologizing. It isn't woo-woo. It is a trait of a high achiever like yourself. So, yeah, forgive the interruption, but I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
So, like for me, I built in 2009. I built a routine, right? So, and my routine was in the gym for 6. At 7 o'clock, I do a meditation for 20 minutes in the car, and then in the office for 8. That was my morning routine. And then typically I do the intermittent fasting. So I typically will have breakfast at around, or lunch at about 12 or half 12 every day. That's my first meal of the day. A couple of black cups of coffee. Really conscious of what I eat, making sure I'm eating good organic food. For me, it's all about doing the right thing by yourself. And also, like I had bought a relatively new Porsche Cayenne 4.5, I'm a car guy, right? 4.5 liter V8 in March of 2008, and that was a high point. Within 6 weeks, the recession had really kicked in. Northern Rock had collapsed. People had stopped spending money, and the writing was on the wall. I had to sell that and massively step down. And I remember going, I've had spent 50 grand on a car, and now I was like, what am I going to buy? With no money really, and I got together like €8,000. I'm like, that's as much as I can spend. I'm going, what will I buy? And people are like, should buy a Ford Mondeo. And I'm going, no, actually, it's important to me. What I want to actually, the one pleasure in life when you're a car guy, you want a car that's nice. And I bought a 10-year-old 745 BMW, and it cost me €8,000. I drove it for a year and a half, and I loved every mile on it. And you learn that it's not about a reg plate. It's not about anything. A lot of people who don't know cars look and say, geez, a 10-year-old BMW, it must be an awful thing. But, you have to take the pleasures that you can take. And it really taught me that money's not important, right? And, happiness comes from spending time with people, friends, and family. And, if you're happy, if you're healthy and your family's healthy, then the reality is you're going to be happy. And if you're broke, you can be happy. But you can be rich and miserable and broke and happy. And that's probably an important thing. And I would say that one of the happiest years of my life was 2009, as I started really realizing that. The second piece is you have to really decide what it is you want to do in life, right? So, do you want your tombstone to say, here lies Kevin O'Loughlin, he did 47 M&A deals in his life and built a company worth $1.5 billion, right? That's never going to be written, and it's not important. Like what I would say is, what you want when you die is you want a packed church of people who say he was a great friend. And that's for me, that's what I strive for. And for us to really make an impact in the world and to make an impact on people, we have to be a really substantial business. So we buy businesses because the more business we buy, the more people we have. The more people we have, the more people we can look after. The bigger we can get as a business, the more opportunities we create for those people. If we have 100 people in our business, and in 5 years we have 100 people, only promotional opportunities for staff are when other people leave. If I have a business that's 100 today and it's 400 in 4 years, that in theory is going to be probably something like, 30 or 40 new managers, 20 or 30 more senior engineers. And it creates that funnel for people to scale up in an organization. So for me, that's what we are as an entity, and I know what we're after. So for long-term scalable success, set a really ridiculous, unachievable objective, like Ireland's largest company, which is still unachievable, by the way. But we're gonna take a big swing for it, and you set that objective, and then you go, well, why am I setting that objective? Well, I am because I want to help 1 million people, and to do that, I need to be Ireland's largest company, because 1 million people is a lot to help. There's only 5 million on the island of Ireland, and I want to, when I say help, I want people to be able to go, because I interacted with Nostra, my life got X amount better, right? So when we're thinking about scale, you go, okay, well, I want to be Ireland's largest company because I want to help 1 million people. Well, then why do I want to help 1 million people? And actually, it comes down to a very simple thing. You know, I would argue that most people derive most of their pleasure by helping others.
Yes.
You know, and actually, if you help 1 million people in your life, that's a hell of a thing to do. You know, and sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was offered an investment opportunity to build accommodation for refugees, and the opportunity financially was crazy good, and I would not in a million years put my name to it, because you're building substandard things, taking advantage of government loopholes to make an additional load of money to have people living in absolute squalor and poverty, because of the way the system is set up for people to take advantage of and win. And it's just wrong. So, you know, any deal I do, I want to be able to go home and sleep at night really well. Yeah. And if you do something that's not good for the world, I think it haunts you in lots of ways. And you know, I think the best thing we can all do is try and make the world a better place. And you know, and for me, it's a really important legacy. You know, you want your family, friends to be proud of what you've done. And I'm not sure if anyone ever, people might admire wealth, but I think people are proud of who you are, not what you do.
Kevin, I've got to tell you, I got goosebumps while you were talking there, because so many of the things that you said absolutely strike a chord with me. I know they'll strike a chord with our listeners. It's incredibly inspiring to hear you talk. I'm intrigued, Kevin, who inspires you, though? Where does this inspiration come from? Are there any mentors or coaches along the way, any people that you want to give a name check for here? Because yeah, you're such an incredible human being. You've just talked about, you know, some of the things that you want to do, the way you go about doing business. Where did this influence come from?
It's probably a good question, and I don't actually have a clear answer. What I would say is, and I've thought a lot about this over the years. You know, I would say I went on a journey of searching. So if I go 0 to 25, right, I was a very happy person, right? And you know, I would say maybe 24, right? So 0 to 24 was a very happy person. And you know, and I was really successful, and I was naturally just in good form, and life was good, and my, you know, I was 25, 25th birthday present to myself. I bought myself a Ferrari Mondial, and I remember driving out of the dealership where I bought it. I was single at the time, and I drove down the road, and I don't think I've ever had a more lonely experience in my life, right? And I collected what was my lifetime ambition. I was 25, I was young, right? But I remember driving out and going, I'm just lonely. And you're driving down the road and you're going, I don't have somebody to share this with. Yeah. And I kind of went on a negative journey then for a couple of years, where I was searching for, you know, happiness, comfort, whatever we want to call it. And that was a car crash of a period of time for me. And then kind of I hit my rock bottom in 2009, you know, personally broke, financially broke. I've been gone from, you know, at 25, having 3 cars parked in my driveway and 4 or 5, 6 houses, whatever the number was. And then you're always in 2009, you've banks trying to repossess properties. you're trying to scramble together cash to buy an £8,000 car and you're hardly able to do it. You have a company where you're getting solicitors' letters every day. And you go on this journey of going, well, like, what the hell is life all about? And I took inspiration from like loads of people. I mean, one of the first things I read, the book The Secret.
Yeah, very famous book.
Yeah, and I found that fascinating. I thought it was a really interesting concept of, deciding what you want, what's your purpose in life. I did a couple of Tony Robbins seminars. Ray Dalio, started looking at all of these kind of public leaders, big Warren Buffett fan. I would say I was inspired by in excess of 100 different people. But what I found was that if you want to really get to the core of your happiness, you have to kind of look back over the last couple of years. And most people who write out, and the interesting, if you write out what were the 10 best moments in the last 10 years, right? I guarantee you 8 of them aren't financial.
Yes.
Don't cost any. And the best things in life are free. And then you kind of realize, well, actually, if the 8 best moments didn't cost anything, have nothing to do with my work, then actually, what is my purpose and what am I trying to do? And then the question I'd say, well, for me, my 8 best moments were helping others. And I mean, helping a guy move house was a big thing. He was broke, I was broke. We were both grabbing cash together to throw it in, to get petrol in the car, to bring him from his bigger house into a smaller house because he was downsizing. And we didn't have enough money to get any alcohol or to go to the pub. So we got a couple of beers in the shop and literally shared the cost of 6 bottles of Heineken. And we're sitting on the balcony and we had a great night. He was so appreciative of me giving him a hand. And, and you kind of realize, well, actually, if life is actually about helping people, then that's what it's about. And the key turning point for me, one of the guys who worked for me came in the midst of it all and said to me, thank you, because I had been paying him on time when we had been leaving loads of other people delayed payments going back to 2009. And he got his mortgage approved. And he goes, thank you. I got my mortgage. I'm set up. My family's set up. It means the world to me. And I'm sitting there kind of in this aha moment. I was going, actually, that's what we could do. If we can actually create a platform to allow our people to be better, to bring them in, to create an opportunity for them to scale and grow within the business. Otherwise, we're just creating a platform for great people to go off and work in other businesses. And that works too. But that, when you actually bring it all down, I would say most people, if they sat back and looked at it and said, when I help somebody, even an old lady crossing the road, you walk away feeling great about yourself. And if we do that all day, every day, then we're going to be happy and content people.
That is such a powerful message, because in my opinion, most MSP owners that I know, and I, being a former MSP, I know myself, we get into this industry for 2 reasons. One, typically, and you alluded to it right at the top of the call, we're good with tech. We're fairly geeky, techie nerds. But the second part of it is we love helping people. And so I think nearly everything you've said today is really going to resonate with our listeners. It has been a treat, and I'm just looking at the time. You've given up over 90 minutes of your time, Kevin, to speak to me today. Knowing how busy you are, I want to say public thank you, appreciate it. But there's been so much gold during this conversation here that I can't wait for people to listen to it and give feedback. Now, if anybody listening to this inspired like I've been, perhaps wants to reach out to you, continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to find you online?
Yeah, look, LinkedIn is I get loads of messages on LinkedIn. That's probably the most straightforward, and just connect and let's have a coffee and a chat. And look, I really enjoy meeting other MSPs, and what I'd say is 9 out of 10 people I meet don't have an interest in doing that, but we always get something out of every conversation. So I'm going to be in the UK, I'm going to be in the US quite a bit in the next 12 months. So if you're going to be in Ireland, UK, US, or even in Europe, and you fancy a coffee, let me know.
Oh, and I would encourage you to reach out to Kevin. If you think this has been a brilliant interview, let this man know, because you are doing incredible work there. I can't wait for us to look back in, say, 5 years' time and see where Nostra is at that point, because I know it's going to be even bigger and better. And actually, you said, it's one of the big, hairy, audacious goals you've got to serve and to help 1 million people. I wouldn't put it past you at all, my friends there. I think you're going to do that. But this has been incredible. As I said during the conversation as well, if you're listening to this interview while you're out walking the dog, driving a car or whatever, and you're like, oh, what was that Kevin said, or what was that book that was mentioned? Don't worry, we've got you back. So you can find all the details at Tubblog, the hub for MSPs, in the blog post that accompanies this and the show notes. But Kevin, thank you, my friend. This has been absolutely incredible. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.